Hi, everybody. Welcome back to episode 26 of In My Plant-Based Kitchen. I am Emma, and I am your host for this weekly get-together of inspiration, healthy plant-based cooking ideas. And this week, we are in week 3 of Veganuary, and we are going to tackle dinner. So in weeks 1 and 2, we talked about breakfast and then lunch. How to make those more plant-based, whether you're trying to transition to a vegetarian or vegan diet completely, or you're just trying to bring some more healthy plant-based foods into your life. Hopefully you're getting some ideas of how to do that along the way. So today we're going to have to talk about dinner. And I think when we look at dinner, often a lot of recipes that are shared are around dinner type recipes. So it's often easier to get inspired about plant-based dinners than it is some of the other meals or snacks or that kind of thing. But it does take some reframing, because so many of us who grew up on an, North American, standard North American diet, or the SAD diet, aptly named, we're used to, myself included, having a meat at the center of the plate, and then like, what kind of meat are we having tonight? And then, oh, maybe we'll have potatoes or rice, and then maybe we'll have some vegetables on the side, and they were always a bit of an afterthought. So when you start thinking about a plant-based way of eating, it's a bit of a reframe. And I've had a lot of people in my classes over the years kind of talk about that. Well, I don't really know, like, it doesn't feel like we're having a main thing. So I talked about component meals and how to build a plant-based plate in my vegan bowls episode. And also I talked a little bit about that idea in the grain salad episode for lunch, which can also makes a wonderful dinner. But today I wanted to talk about, what if you do want to have sort of a main thing, and then have some sauteed kale or steamed veggies, or a nice big salad on the side. What can you do and for the main event? And so casseroles, curries, those types of things are really, really helpful, especially, I mean, they're great things to have at any time, but especially when you are transitioning or just trying to start out and try some new plant-based meals. Sometimes these sort of familiar type dishes can be very, very helpful. So I'm talking about like things like a shepherd's pie that has been veganized, or a pot pie, or like a vegetable pot pie, or casseroles, like I said. So all of these things are, these types of forms, meal forms, are really helpful. They can be really helpful at this time. So last week we talked a little bit about transition foods as well, some of the plant-based alternatives that are out there, and I wanted to share a recipe today. We're going to make it today, that does use, I mean, you can or not, and I'm going to talk about both of those things, but it does, you can potentially use some of the transition foods, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about the choices that you're making when you're looking at your transition foods, so that's all part of today's session. But before we get into the cooking, I kind of wanted, there were a few main takeaway points that I wanted to share with you today, to hopefully get you thinking about as we're going through this recipe. One of them is that if you're looking at including some transition foods, so let's just take a shepherd's pie, for example. One way that you could veganize a shepherd's pie would be to replace the ground beef in it with a veggie ground round of some kind, totally, and just do a straight switch over. And that's absolutely fine. That is a great way to kind of get away from the meat and sub in something very familiar that, possibly people won't even be able to tell. I have some meat eaters in my life who love that kind of meal. It feels sort of comforting to them. It's still very tasty, or it's everything we cook is tasty. Let's not be kidding. um, but you know, it's still really tasty. It's familiar. That's the key here. And when you're trying to bring people along, or you're cooking for people who don't normally eat plant-based, that can be very, very important, and it can make the difference between them saying, you know what, I'm not eating that whatever, or oh, that looks really good, I'm going to try it. So that can be a really important point. But it doesn't have to be, that doesn't have to be where you stop. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. So one idea would be to, okay, so let's make a shepherd's pie with some veggie ground round in it. Take out the meat, but let's cut back on the ground round, and let's add some green lentils or some kidney beans or something like that. So you're adding in another really nice whole food into that, reducing the amount of the transition food, and still getting a really nice texture and something, you know, so it doesn't have to be all or nothing is the point. The texture is a really big thing for people when they're adding in beans. So another thing to do would be to add in a grain like rice or farro or something like that. That so you don't end up having, you know, a shepherd's pie. Say you were going to make it all with kidney beans, it's going to be a bit heavy and maybe a little, you know, depending on how you cook your beans, could potentially be a little bit mushy, and you know, and a lot of people don't love that beany kind of texture. So if you add something like ground soy curls or a you know, some, like I said, a grain of some kind, and switch it, like mix it up, you're going to add more nutrition anyway, and also you will end up with a nicer texture. The second point is that some of the transition foods are definitely better than others, so it really helps here if you get your reading glasses out, if you need them like I do, and read your labels. So I wanted to share one, this company, Big Mountain Foods. I originally made this recipe with their cauli-crumble, which is made primarily from cauliflower and pea protein. This is still a processed food, there's no doubt about it. This one is made with their lion's mane mushroom is the main ingredient. But when you're looking for a product, the really, I mean, to me, the main things to look at are what's the ingredient list? Does it have a bunch of ingredients and additives and preservatives in it that you do not recognize? You can't say. That's indication number one that you might want to stay away from that. These particular products are all whole foods. Everything on that ingredient list I recognize. You want to look at the salt and the sugar. So this one is a little higher in sodium. It's got 11%, and I generally try with my anything processed that I purchase to stay under 7%. So it is a little higher than usual, but we are going to be adding this to a bunch of lentils. So that's what we're doing in this recipe today. We're going to be using half lentils and half this. So if we were using all this, we'd probably have a bit of a higher sodium content than we want, but because we're going to be mixing it and diluting that with just some red lentils, then it's going to be, I'm okay with that. And then the last thing is the sugar, and this has very little sugar in it. It's got 2 grams of sugar for the whole thing. So actually I think it's the whole thing, half a cup. No, it's probably not the whole thing. It's probably 2 servings in here. I would say it's probably a cup. So anyway, those are some things to consider when you're looking at the labels. There definitely is a huge difference. Some of the products that are coming out now, like I don't want to name any labels. Like, again, I don't really like bringing products into my videos because I'm not promoting anything particular. I don't make any money off of that. But I'm just sharing in this case, something that I really like using in my kitchen. And again, but some of the newer products are they're as high in saturated fat and salt and sugar, and they have all kinds of preservatives in them, which make them taste really familiar and nice, but they're maybe not so great for our health. So what was the last thing I wanted to talk about was including beans and lentils and split peas, the legume family, the bean and legume family, as often as you can. So generally in my classes, I find that beans are a big sticking point for people because, you know, the people that I've consulted with or had in my classes have sort of said to me many, many times, I have a really hard time getting in the, you know, even a serving of beans every day, because we don't tend to have dishes, a lot of dishes, maybe hummus or, you know, some Mexican dishes that have black beans in them on a regular basis. So I think that it is, but if you're going to include them on a daily basis, it's really important to find ways that you can incorporate them lots of new and interesting ways. And I just want to say, again, talk a little bit about why it's so important to do this, because I've seen people transition. They increase their fruit and vegetable intake. They increase perhaps their intake of whole grains. They're doing all kinds of really great things, but they're not getting the beans in. And one, they tend to feel hungry because beans are so satiating. And two, they're not getting all the benefits. Beans are such an incredible source of fiber that our gut bacteria loves to eat. They're an incredible source of lots of minerals like iron and calcium, potassium. They have all kinds of really wonderful benefits for our health. They help to lower our cholesterol. They help our heart health. And there's something called the lentil effect, or the second meal effect, that scientists found that when you eat a serving of lentils, it was initially in the studies, but then they found it was true. This was true for any kinds of beans. And when you eat a serving of legumes, your blood sugar control is way better for hours after you have that meal and even into the next day. So Dr. Greger talks about this in one of his, actually, I think in probably all three of his books. And he has a video on it too. So I'll link that below so you can get more information about that if you want. But eating beans regularly is so important for all of those reasons and more. So really great way to start to find ways to incorporate them into more meals. However you can add them in, it's a good thing. So what we're going to make today is, it's called a red lentil. I called it a cauli-crumble loaf because I originally used cauli crumble in it, and you totally can do that, or find some other kind of, you know, it's really just a ground type of alternative. So you can use something like that. We're going to use this lion's mane one today. But I'm going to get this started. I have pre-cooked the lentils. I pre-chopped everything just to make it go a little bit faster for us here today. And I'm going to start my pan up and get that preheating. We're going to do a no oil saute with our onions. I've chopped up a bunch of, or one onion, couple of teaspoons of garlic. These are, I've talked about the immune benefits of onions and garlic before. Onions are also really high in quercetin, which is one of the anti-aging nutrients that there's a lot of chitter chatter about online and in health circles recently. So that is a good thing to include. So I have already cooked some red lentils, a cup of red lentils. And if you are not familiar with what they look like, these are split red lentils. I love having these in my pantry at all times because they are great added to soup. They actually have no, they don't really have a heavy texture like a lot of beans. They're very fast cooking. They cook in about 15 minutes. So they're a great one to keep on hand. You can add them to soups and curries, and even just a little bit, you're going to be adding a whole lot of nutrition to whatever it is you're cooking. So I cooked a cup up with 2 cups of water. You can use water or a low sodium stock or some kind of, you know, yeah, a stock of some kind. And then just cook them for 15 minutes. Get those going first because we're going to need them to add to the casserole here. And then the other thing I did was I cooked up some, you can see here, I haven't done anything with them other than drain them yet, but I cooked up some sweet potatoes, which we're going to use as our potato on the top. You can absolutely use regular potatoes if you prefer, if you have someone in your family who doesn't love sweet potatoes, but the nutrition difference is quite large, and I will talk about that a little bit when we get to that part. But first, I'm gonna have a swig of my green tea, and I can feel that my pan is getting hot, so I'm going to add my onions, chopped onions. This is going to add a ton of flavor as well as nutrition. Onions are a good thing to get into your diet every day if you can, and if you tolerate them. We're just going to let them. I don't know if you can hear the crackling, but I'm going to let them crackle away there for a moment. And we just want them really to get to a translucent place where they're translucent, and we're going to put the garlic in next. While those are cooking, I'm going to just chop up my mushrooms. You want about roughly 2 cups of mushrooms. Again, this recipe is very, very versatile. You could use green lentils instead of red lentils or French puis lentils, something like that. You just want to cook them ahead of time because we're going to cook everything together, put it into our casserole dish. I've preheated the oven to 350 degrees. And so the recipe calls for 2 cups of onion or 2 cups of sliced mushrooms. If you don't like the big pieces of mushrooms, you can certainly cut them down a bit more. I do tend to like them. Again, mushrooms are a very, very good food to get in on a daily basis. Talk about more about their benefits in another video sometime. We're gonna go ahead. My onions are starting to sweat, so I'm gonna go ahead and put the garlic in now. If you, again, I always say this, but it bears repeating. If you're not comfortable yet with a no oil saute and putting your onions directly in, know that the key is preheating your pan, making sure that you don't really want the pan to be cold when you put it in, or even not, like you want it to be pretty hot because otherwise you're going to get some sticking. But if you are at all worried about it, just keep a tablespoon or 2 of water or stock handy, and you can always add it if things start to stick. But you can see here, I don't have any sticking going on. And we are going to add our mushrooms next. If I was doing this, I'd probably let them cook a little bit longer, but we're going to just forge ahead. Add our mushrooms. And when you add mushrooms in a recipe like this, of course, mushrooms are going to release a lot of water. So a lot of liquid as they start to cook down. So they're going to keep everything pretty nice and moist. Okay, so that's the beginning of our saute. You do want quite a big pan for this. And I want to say as well, if you, we're going to be making a 9 by 11 casserole dish full of this. If you don't want quite that much, it's quite a lot. It serves a good, you know, it's a eight good size servings. More if you have people who don't eat as much. But if you don't want that much, you can definitely half this recipe and use an 8 by 8 pan, and that works really well as well. We're just gonna keep this, just keep moving this around a little bit. Not stirring it too much, letting it actually cook. And then the next thing we're gonna add is I have 2 carrots and 2 stems of celery. Actually, it was 3 carrots because my carrots were very small and I wanted to add a few carrots. So I've chopped these up quite small because it's only going to be in the oven for about 25 minutes. So we do want it to get pretty soft in there. And I don't know if you can see, but you might notice that I left the skin on. And this is something about whole foods cooking. Whenever you can leave the skin on, do it. These are organic carrots. So I gave them a good scrub, left the skin on. There are more nutrients, different kinds of fiber in the skin than there are in the actual carrot. So if you're trimming that all away, you're losing a lot of nutrition. So make sure you don't do that. The same with sweet potatoes. I'm gonna talk about that a little bit more too. But yeah, whenever you can, especially when you're buying organic, don't waste those nutrients, that special fiber that's part of the skin of. If you think about eating the whole food, we want to eat the leaves and the, every edible part that we can. And in grocery stores, they're not allowed to sell things that are not edible. So if the leaves are not edible, you won't see them at the grocery store. They'll have to cut them off. So we're going to go ahead. My mushrooms are cooking down a little bit. Again, I'd probably leave it a little longer if I wasn't doing this on TV or on YouTube, whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and add my carrots and celery. And I'm going to let those cook down and soften. If you want, you can actually leave those. You could probably cover it and let them steam a little bit in their own juices. The next thing I've got to add is some rehydrated sun-dried tomatoes. And if you a good tip here is if you are rehydrating something like sun-dried tomatoes, you could put that liquid aside to use as your liquid that you can add, because it's got some flavor, it's got some nutrients in it. So don't toss that liquid out once you've done it. Same with mushrooms. If you're rehydrating mushrooms, keep the liquid and you can use it in your cooking. And you could definitely use the liquid here if you find that your end result is a little bit drier than you want. Okay. And if you have a lot of sun-dried tomatoes or artichokes, things like that, you can buy them in oil, of course. So I'd recommend, if you can, just get the ones that are not in oil, that you have to reconstitute. But if that's what you have in your pantry, you can definitely use those. I would just give them a really good rinse. Try and get as much of the oil off as you can, so you're not getting a ton of oil in your dish. All right. So the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to open this up, because we're going to be adding our lentils and our cauli-crumble. So just as while I'm thinking about it too, you'll notice that this has all happened pretty quickly. And like I said, I probably would give it a little bit more cooking time, but the reason why it goes so quickly is because I had everything chopped up ahead of time. This is a really, really key pro tip for making your cooking process more enjoyable, less stressful, more organized. You won't end up in a situation where you don't have something. If you don't have something, you'll know about it ahead of time. You'll be able to think, okay, what can I use instead? Or what can I replace it with? So it really helps in the planning process, mise en place, highly recommended for a lot of fun, much better environment in the kitchen. And it just helps things to go more smoothly, especially when you're getting used to a different kind of cooking. If you're really comfortable, then truth be told, I don't always do this. I often do it, but I don't always do it. If I'm really in a rush and I want to get things started, I'll chop up my onions, put them in, carry on. But when you're learning a different type of cooking, like plant-based, and you want to be able to pay attention to what your food is doing, and you don't want it to, say you're trying the oil-free cooking for the first time, and you don't want the onions to burn and so on. Just makes it a lot easier if you've got everything ready to go. Okay, so we're getting everything's getting nice and toasty there. I'm going to, this is what you can see. It's a very crumbly kind of product we've got here. I really love this lion's mane mushrooms. Lion's mane mushrooms are, you know, one of those superfoods, I guess, and something that I never get them into my diet unless I buy them in this form. You can buy them and find them in some health food stores, or, you know, if you've got a local, we have, it's not a local mushroom to where we are, at least. So they are a nice thing to get in. I believe they're an adaptogen, so they're really great, a great thing to include. Okay, so we've got, so you can see it's starting to look a bit, maybe a little bit like shepherd's pie, or maybe not. But this is, it's funny because it's snowing here right now. You might be able to see, probably not. But it's so funny. I created this recipe probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I always end up bringing it out at this time of year. It's just like this ultimate comfort food for my family. So we're gonna go ahead and put all you can see the lentils are pretty soft. There's not any liquid left over. If you have liquid left over, you do want to cook these until they're soft. We don't really want a lot of texture to our lentils in this dish. Actually, red lentils, you're not going to get a lot of texture ever, because when they're cooked, they're pretty mushy, but we don't want a soup. So I would recommend following the water lentil ratio in the recipe. And we're just going to let all of that simmer together. And then the next thing we're going to do, we haven't added any, you know, sort of strong flavors to this, so we're going to add a little bit of a sauce. So I'm actually going to use this bowl, I think. We have got, actually, that's not true. The sun-dried tomatoes have a pretty good punch of flavor. So we've got some ketchup. I normally make my own ketchup, but I have some ketchup left over from our holiday. I'm just going to use that up. You want a 1/4 cup of ketchup. And if you can, make your own condiments. It's a really good way to control what goes into them. So normally I do try to do that. And I have a great ketchup recipe that I usually use, which I can share at some point if you guys are interested. And then we are also going to want a tablespoon of molasses. So this gives it a kind of a barbecue-y kind of that. Oh, maybe I'm not going to be able to get this open. I'm going to have to run that in. Oh, there we go. Had this molasses for a while, so it's a tablespoon. Take a while for that to come out. So this is going to give it some sweetness, but you probably know that molasses is very high in iron, so really nice way to add some sweetness with a lot of minerals too. It has some other helpful minerals as well. I'm going to just turn this down because I don't want it to start sticking to the bottom, which it is not yet. Don't want it to either. We're going to put in a tablespoon of Bragg soy alternative. Any kind of soy sauce that you want to use is fine. This one's a little bit lower in sodium, which is why I like it. We're going to add just a little bit of, oh, you know what I forgot to add? Some Italian seasoning. I meant to add that to the mixture, which I'll do. So I'll do that in a moment. About a 1/4 tablespoon or 1/4 teaspoon of liquid smoke. So you want to try and get a natural one. If you can't, actually, I would say get a natural one or don't get it. Because some of them are, you know, kind of chemically formed. So good to get a natural one if you can find it. And I don't ever have trouble finding it just in my local grocery store. And I'm also going to use a bit of chili powder. So use these things to taste. Mix that all up. I think that's everything. Yep. And we've got a nice kind of, it's like a barbecue sauce. That's what it smells like. It's very similar to my barbecue sauce recipe as well. Okay, so like I was saying, I want to, can you tell I use these a lot? Put a couple of teaspoons or more of the Italian herb mix into, I should have put this in a little bit earlier, forgot. No biggie. The more herbs and spices you can add to something, the better. Not only does it add flavor, but it's gonna add nutrients. Of the Italian herb mix has oregano and basil and all kinds of like super high antioxidant rich herbs in it. The next thing is we're gonna go ahead and add the sauce. And mix it right in. So you want this to be, the texture you're looking for is you want it to be a little bit, like you don't want it to be runny, but this is kind of what you're looking for. You want it to be soft and you don't want it to be too dry or, you know, start to look lumpy at all. You want it to be very mixable, I guess. I don't know what you call this texture. And the reason for that is this is going to cook for 25 minutes, 25, 30 minutes. And it will dry out a little bit in that process. So this is perfect. That's exactly what you want. If you don't have that texture, if it's a bit drier than that, you can use some of that reconstituted sun-dried tomato liquid. You could just add a little bit of water or a little bit of broth or something like that would be fine. Next thing, taste it. Where's my tasting spoon? Some molasses on my arm. I have a tasting spoon. I'll use my teaspoon. You always want to taste as you go. Make sure that you've got the flavors you want. So yummy. So I'm going to go ahead and move some of this stuff out of the way. Now, okay. I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to put all of this in here. And this is the base of the casserole. Really similar, or it's very heavy, it's cast iron. And then just spread it out. I've made this for so many people who just absolutely love it. It's a really, if you have people who are sort of reluctant and do like a casserole type shepherd's pie or something like that in your family, or your friend group, this is a really good one to make for them. It's very comforting. Serve it with some steamed broccoli or some sort of seared Brussels sprouts or a nice crisp green salad, and it makes a really nice meal. Now, the last thing we're gonna do is we're going to mash up our sweet potatoes. And I promised to talk a little bit about these. So you could absolutely, more traditional, this is not at all traditional shepherd's pie, but usually a shepherd's pie would have obviously white potatoes on it. White potatoes, and I'm not saying you should never eat them. They are lovely, they are comforting, they have a lot of nutrition in them. But what sweet potatoes have over them is they have more nutrition. They're very colorful, so they're actually a great source of antioxidants, especially when you leave the skin on, because the skin has 10 times the antioxidants of the flesh. So great thing to leave the skin on. And I love it in this mash because it gives the mash more texture as well. But they're a lot more nutritious, and white potatoes tend to, they're actually one of the foods that can negatively affect your blood sugar level and your insulin resistance. So it's a good thing in my mind. If you like sweet potatoes, it's a really easy switch to make. I'm going to add a little bit of unsweetened. Make sure your milk is unsweetened and taste it, because some of them even say unsweetened and they are sweetened. And if you add that to mashed potatoes or mashed sweet potatoes, then you will regret it because they're going to be sweet and not in a good way. Okay, so I've got some nice mashing going on. I don't need to add much liquid here because the sweet potatoes have quite a bit of liquid in them already. I cooked them brought them to a boil and then cooked them for about 15 minutes, maybe 12 minutes, until they were just nice and soft. I am also going to add a little bit of table tasty, which is a really nice salt alternative that I like. Here, you could add a little bit of salt and pepper here if you prefer. And this is a great place also to add some herbs. I will add like rosemary or something like that. So you can do that. And that's it. It's nice and creamy already, just with that tiny bit of soy milk. I'm going to go ahead and spread that out too. And this was 4 big sweet potatoes I cooked up. These are so good for you, sweet potatoes. They just, like I said, have so much great fiber, great source of nutrients. They're super comforting, nice on a snowy day. I guess that's why I always get this recipe out at this time of year. And then we're going to bake it up. I am going to just add a bit of pepper to the top layer here. You can take your fork and texture it somehow, probably a little bit of pepper. I find that actually makes it really nice. And then often with, I don't have a fork at the moment, but I'll just sort of make some texture on it before I put it in the oven. And then you cook it for 25 minutes at 375. I have my oven preheating too, so 25, 30 minutes. And then I usually just broil it for a minute or two just to make the top crispy and brown and really tasty looking. So I will share a picture of that finished product with you as well. That's that. That is red lentil lion's mane loaf for you, or shepherd's pie, veganized and healthified. That pepper's coming back on me here. So the last thing I wanted to mention is a book that I'm reading right now. I mentioned this in my resources video, but How Not to Age. A big piece of when you're transitioning or just trying to improve, or increase your plant-based foods or eat healthier, whatever your goal is. I think, and for me, it personally works, is to read things that are inspiring and supportive of that. And so I ordered myself a copy of Dr. Greger's new book, How Not to Age. I am such a huge fan of Dr. Greger, as any of you know me know. All of his books are wonderful, but How Not to Age is I guess I'm at the age where I'm really appreciating it because the message in it is so much about health span as opposed to lifespan, and living the healthiest that we can up until as long as we can, and how we do that, the practicalities and the science that supports the way that we can eat and live in our, sort of middle age or the early life to support a really healthy I want to say old age, but elder years, I guess. And I think this is such a big thing because, I'm probably at the age right now where a lot of people around me are starting to experience chronic lifestyle diseases and having problems in their elder years. And it sometimes feels like this is inevitable. And I think that's very much the message in our society, and that this book is very much you know, kind of giving a different message. So I highly recommend that read. That's my little inspiration tip for this week. And that is it for episode 26 of In My Plant-Based Kitchen. I hope you found it inspiring. I hope you make the loaf. I hope you enjoy it. And if you have any questions or anything that you would like to hear me talk about, I know that some of you have sent me questions that I haven't gotten to yet, and I will address them in the coming weeks. I just really wanted to get through this Veganuary series and talk about some specific things. So I will maybe we'll have a whole episode just on addressing some of the questions that have come in. But if you do have a question or something that you'd like to hear about, please send me, fill out the form below and send it to me. And, you know, do all the things. Subscribe to my newsletter, stay in touch. I'd love to hear from you. And I'd love to hear how your Veganuary is going. Have a wonderful week. I will see you next week. We're going to be talking about either snacks or desserts. Haven't decided yet, but we will talk about one of those things. So hope to see you there.